I'm Nikita Lalla from LNP, and here for another Around the Table podcast with the amazing and incredible Olabimpe and Tanya. Olabimpe is from JCDecaux. I will try the French pronunciation.
It's fine.
And Tanya is from the mining sector. Both are in-house legal teams. Olabimpe, Senior Regional Legal Advisor, and Tanya, Legal Contracts and
Legal
Manager.
contracts and officer, legal officer and
And
contracts
legal
manager.
officer.
Yes.
Perfect. And we're going to be discussing something that I think we have a bad reputation for as lawyers, or perhaps we're notorious about, and how to change that. I think it's very often said that lawyers were known as the Department of No. So we're going to try and explore in today's podcast how we change that, and how we're perhaps seen as the go-to department as opposed to the barrier. Tanya, do you want to maybe have what are your thoughts on why we may be known as the Department of No?
You as a legal officer, you actually need to understand the business. And also it's important for you to know that the purpose of the business is to make profit. So as much as you want to guard them against the risk of not complying with the law, you need to do it in such a way that is also business friendly, because the aim is not really to be a bottleneck. The aim is for you to be able to allow business to go in a way that is not going to cause problems for the business, that is not going to cause financial exposure.
Do you think it's because, Olabimpe, that perhaps, just touching on what Tanya said, it's how we're trained? The first thing that comes out to us when we're asked to look at a problem is all the things you can't do, as opposed to, because we don't get trained on that at university. We get trained on the legislation, the law, etc., and how to interpret it, but not how to utilize it from a business sense. What do you?
Yeah, I think we're risk managers first and foremost.
Yeah.
So we're naturally risk averse, and we're meant to really look at whatever is presented to us by the business from the standpoint of what is the implication of doing this. Just like a child comes to you and says, "Mom, I want ice cream, I want chocolate." But your mom, maybe, for example, the child is diabetic, right? Yeah. The mom knows, if I give this child chocolate, this is the implication. So mom says no, which is why mothers too are seen as a no party. So it's a thing where we hear the nice things.
We were just talking about that with Tanya.
The business will come up with very nice strategy about how they want to, generate revenue, a new business idea, which is nice. But then you as a legal counsel, you're not just thinking about that nice business idea, but you're also thinking about, okay, what will be the legal implication of this? Is this plausible? If I look at the legal requirements applicable to this idea, is it possible? Now, based on what Tanya mentioned, our job now is to also look at things beyond that, because we can get bogged down by just thinking like lawyers. But we also need to think creatively like lawyers. And the only way to do so is to understand the business, to understand how they're operating. It's just like, I don't know, and I always use basic examples, right? Somebody comes and says, I want to use this needle and thread to make this cloth, right? I know if you use the needle and thread, you injure yourself. I'm thinking of the legal implication. But I also know that there are opportunities in this idea. So I'm going to think like you, understand how you use it. So I want to put myself in your shoes. How do you use this? Because that's the only way I can think of something creatively that would help you. So a lot of the times where we tend to be too far away from the business and not understanding why they are thinking the way they are thinking, what sort of opportunities they want to sort of leverage. And because of that, we just advise based on what does the law say, this is it. And then it sounds like a no, because you're not even widening your horizon to see what opportunities, how you can leverage certain things, even the so-called legal requirements. How can you sort of look at an opportunity in that rather than just a risk? So I think that really helps differentiate between business partners, legal counsels that are business partners, and just legal counsels. Yeah.
And I mean, you guys are incredibly experienced, and so anecdotally, like, what would you guys suggest to the listeners, to other in-house legal counsel, about how you get closer to the business and how you start to be seen as business partners, maybe rather than just in-house legal, advisors who are telling you about the risk. So, any sort of things that you guys have tried out, anything you've seen being utilized that's been useful for developing that business partner relationship?
Okay. For me, really what has worked is to be actually part of the business. When I say part of the business is I attend the ops meetings, I attend most of the management meetings, and I also have like one-on-one meetings with the directors because that's where you actually understand what they want. And if you are an in-house counsel, you're like a service provider to the business. So it's always important to understand what your clients want and where they're trying to go to. So the other thing that I've also done, having been having gotten an opportunity to be in the mining business, it is a very specialized sector. So when I joined, I actually had to take my time to understand the industry itself, to make sure that my knowledge is not only restricted to the statutes, but my knowledge is also extended to the mining operations themselves. Because it's only when you actually understand the business where that these people are in, where that is actually where you can actually be able to see how you can be able to apply the law for them to go where they want to be. So it's always important to have that alignment with the business. Don't treat yourself as an island in the business. You should have like an open door policy, even with the guys from ops, with the guys from finance. You need to understand what they are trying to do and where they want the business to go to. And also the other thing that has worked for me is to just ask questions. Don't be scared to ask questions. Yeah. So you know where the business is and what they're trying to do.
I think that's, you said something so incredibly important there because, so for my sins at our law firm, I lead the tech team as well because we've got our own in-house tech development. And I say this all the time to the lawyers is, even when I was a junior, I'm guilty of it as well. We never asked questions. We got instructions from clients or we got instructions from our supervising partners or senior associates, whatever the case may be. And we simply just went off thinking, oh, we know what to do. And yet with the tech team that I manage, they will never leave a meeting without having asked me half a dozen or more questions on, wait a second, what are you trying to achieve? What do you want? When do you want it? Do you want it in this format or do you want it in another format? And these are all things that lawyers actually don't ask. They just go off and then a week later you get something and you go, oh my gosh, that's not actually what I was asking. And it's not on them, it's also on the way you gave the instruction. But so those two things for me where you're talking about, being on the ground with the ops team as well and asking questions, I think is critical because it's just not part of our training. We train to critically think, but not to doubt and I'm sorry, I'm going to say this, I say this all the time. I feel like lawyers, and we're type A narcissistic personalities for the most part, right? And we've done well at school, we've done well at university, and then all of a sudden you've got clients asking you for advice, and you start to live in this bubble. And do you think that's one of the issues, Olabimpe, with maybe why we don't ask questions or why we're not, at grassroots on the ground level saying, how do these things get done?
I think, in all fairness to lawyers, I think we spent a lot of years studying law. And just preparing a contract for a transaction can be quite overwhelming that you feel like you don't have enough headspace to listen to other issues. And then it becomes and there's also the aspect where we tend to read a lot. When things come to us, we want to understand. We need to understand these things. And there's also the fear of taking other responsibilities, which sometimes as in-house counsels, you also want to set boundaries, right? Like, okay, I don't think I should be thinking, even though there's a department for thinking this way, and they don't want to end up taking on that responsibility, even though they need to study to be able to prefer the legal solution. But they're always careful to set those boundaries and ensure that at least the departments are doing what they need to do. But there is one thing, just based on Tanya's response, is that I think we also need to think like we own the business, because sometimes people treat instructions like this is an instruction. And a lot of the key challenges I have when I'm sort of drafting a contract is actually commercial terms. The boilerplates are basic. The indemnity clauses are, they're basic. But the commercial terms, sometimes it can be very hard just drafting a consideration clause, because the sales team or the business, they might come up with, different payment terms or consideration terms. It could be revenue sharing. It could be something, very complex terms. And you have to think about it deeply. You also sometimes have to even think about if their proposal is commercially viable, even though you're not the commercial department.
Yes.
So you have to think like, if this was my business, would I be happy doing this? Because you'll be surprised that there are teams from departments that they just do and issue instructions, but they don't think about it from if I was running this business as my own, would I really make profit from agreeing to this counterparty's term? So sometimes I like to also explain to them that I've read your commercial terms, but do you think this is workable if you were wearing the hat of the business, if it was your business? So I think it's also important to, approach things that way, apart from understanding the business, but taking it as yours.
Yes.
When you're reviewing the payment, the financial or commercial terms. I think it's key.
And Tanya, I know you're in a very highly regulated space,
Yeah.
right? And there are a lot of sort of prescripts of what you can and can't do.
Yes.
Do you think that you're still able to, because I think Olabimpe, what you're saying is fantastic. I mean, it does make sense if you can take that ownership, if you can, go beyond just saying, well, I'm only looking at the boilerplate clauses or the regulatory provisions. Do you think, though, in an environment that's so highly regulated, that you can say, okay, this is where I take ownership of this particular strategy?
Yeah, I have had scenarios where I'd actually had to take ownership of certain issues. But as I said, the business does not belong to one person. If you are a team,
Yeah.
you have to be inclusive of the other members of the team. You need to hear other people. You need to hear what they want also out of the business. It's not something that you can just say, oh, this is what we're going to do, and that's what I'm sticking to. And also, you actually need to weigh the risks. Because remember, we are risk managers, right?
Right.
Managing risk does not just mean that you must only take opportunities that do not have risk.
Yeah.
You can actually take an opportunity that has risk and then manage it in such a way that it does not cause problems for the business. Yes. But you can't really say whatever you have said, that's it. You actually need to consider where the other people are also coming from. And if you cannot maybe reach common ground with the business, you always have that option to seek help from the external legal resources. In my case, we do have good external legal resources. I'm lucky in that sense that my directors actually gave us an allowance that we have a law firm that we always rely on if there are matters that we can't handle on our own. And I know that maybe sometimes if it is actually coming from a person who's not in the business, it's easier to actually pass the message to my directors. And the other thing that I also just want to mention is that no, as much as it is sounds like a bad word, sometimes it's not really like because you're saying no, but it's about the way you put it across. The way you're saying no is what matters. So you actually need to have soft skills. It's something that I've had to actually learn to have. Before I joined in-house corporate, I thought it's easy. You don't really need, it's just black and white, but it's not always black and white. There's always that gray area, and it always depends on how you put yourself across to the directors. That actually matters.
It's quite interesting because, you're talking about external law firms and
Yes.
obviously being on the side of being the external law firm for a lot of clients. I think, did you find it a huge transition to go into being the external counsel that could say no perhaps and could just give the opinion or have the call and say, okay, then we walk away, to actually being in-house and having to learn those skills, whether it's like the soft skills, as you say, or the ability to reframe how you're going to get the message across. I mean, was that a huge transition? Was there anything there that you think, perhaps is so different from being in-house to being your external lawyer? Because I always find it fascinating. I think for myself, but it might also be the sector I'm in. I have no EQ whatsoever. I'm like, the answer is no, or the answer is yes. This is what we can do, guys. And I'm the first person to want to try something different, but I also don't have to frame it in a particular way because I'm sitting on the other side of the table like I am now.
Yeah.
So, how did you navigate that?
Yeah, I think I started my legal career in a law firm focused on litigation.
Yeah.
And I think if I don't know about, how it's practiced here, but if you spend a lot of time drafting court processes, there's just a different tone, the adversarial, the advocacy. It's very hard. There's less tact there because you're challenging, you're fighting. And that can easily affect one's ability to sort of be diplomatic in-house. But for commercial lawyers, I think they might be able to integrate well a bit. And when I mean commercial, those that really deal with deals, closing deals and M&As and certain things, they tend to sit down with businesses and sort of have these conversations like, what are your goals? What do you wish to achieve? So their tone, their writing can be much better. But the difference in-house is you would think in a law firm, the complexity of your presentation of your documents gives you this thumbs up, right? Like, oh, this person is so smart. You get that. But it's funny in-house, if it becomes too complex, they'll tell you there's too much English here. Like sometimes you need I tell myself, okay, basic words, sentences, because, some people, numbers people, tech people sometimes don't want to read something verbose, they want something just light, so that they can understand. Doesn't mean they are dumb. It's just that's how they are. We are used to reading documents and complex documents. Yeah. So our output can be complex, but if you're not used to that over time, you just want something basic. Senior management teams, they want results. They have too many things to think about. They want an email that is a 3-liner or 2-liner telling them what the risk is and what the solution is, and then they don't mind spending hours in meetings talking. But so you can't feel good about a well-structured, obviously it has to be grammatically correct, but just less complexity to be able to send out that message, because it's that message you need. That is your KPI, not how well the document looks, but how well you've communicated it based on whatever nuanced environment you find yourself. So if you're dealing with a counterparty that is not that educated or is less sophisticated, then you need to draft a contract that is less sophisticated and will still protect your business. It's just the way of the world with in-house.
And I think that's it, right? Especially with busy executives or directors, is if you haven't gotten the message across in the first 3 sentences, you've lost your audience.
Yeah.
And that's probably the most important thing, is knowing your audience.
Yes.
Do you guys find, because it was one of the things I read in an article, is that sometimes in-house legal teams can get inundated with requests that are not purely legal, or that may be stretching resources quite thin, in the sense that they should be dealt with elsewhere, or they shouldn't be dealt with by more senior legal advisors. Is that something that you guys have had to deal with? And if so, how have you managed to, manage your resources or frame your responses so that you're not offending anyone, but you're also focusing on the what you're actually paid to focus on?
Okay.
I'll go with Tanya.
Happy to go.
In corporate, it's always difficult. We do have a job description,
Yeah.
but it's always difficult to stick to the job description. One, because the work is just a lot, and you need to get the goals, you need to achieve the goals.
Yeah.
And the second thing also, what has really kind of affected me is that I still suffer from this perfection syndrome.
Yeah.
I don't trust the next person. For instance, we have credit applications that we get from our suppliers.
Yeah.
I know that the business has actually allocated some junior people to actually fill it in.
Yeah.
But the problem is coming from me sometimes, I have to be honest. I don't really have trust in those people that they're going to be able to fill in the details that I want.
Yeah.
Yes. But I've also noticed that the issue of getting too much work that doesn't really align to what you're supposed to do, it's like common in corporate. But you always have to also maybe analyze if you have the capacity to do it, and also just be able to speak out, as I said before. Boundaries should be there, but there should be boundaries in such a way that they are actually allowing you to excel in your role, but they are not crippling the business. You can't just say, no, this is ops, I'm not going to do it. Sometimes you've been given that task to work on something that is ops related, because at the end of the day, it's going to have a bearing in whatever legal matter you're going to deal with. Maybe it's going to end up being a legal dispute. So when you get that maybe opportunity to work on things, as much as you have the capacity to do it, you need to embrace that opportunity. But it's always important to speak out if you do not have capacity to do things. Yes.
Have you been on the other side where you've just gone, no, I actually can't because you're distracting me from what I really need?
Yeah, I'll be lying if I haven't. But in all fairness to the business, there's this, when you become and I think it's that theory about being very capable, right? Where more work comes to you. So businesses, to a certain extent, feel like they can trust legal with, even if it's just to write a letter or just a termination notice or something. They just believe that legal will, apply that extra to it. But then, if you enable it, and which is the perfectionism, there's an irony to it, because if you're too like, okay, I want to see, then they get comfortable. It's like training the mind or training people. If you don't push the work to them to even try to apply their mind, then they become too comfortable relying on you, such that they're like, I don't want to even fill this form. Send it to legal, because I know legal, and they might just be basic information. So and another thing is they fear legal because they're just always afraid of the implication of doing something wrong.
No.
So it's like, rather than attempting to even touch this document, why not just send it to legal, even though maybe it's just a portion of that document that requires legal's attention, but just the fear of, doing it wrongly and then costing the business something, because we have instilled that fear in them, because in-house counsel, we do have this tendency to address the business team and say, hey, whatever you're reviewing, even before you move left or right, you must send it to us, And that alone, once they have that mindset, they're like, okay, I don't want to waste too much time. Let's just send it to them and, they can knock themselves out. So I think we need to find a balance, which is why we want them to trust us, why we know we need to, just like children, so I sometimes would say, draft what you wish to draft. I'm happy to vet. As opposed to me doing it from scratch, especially business letters. Like, no, I see that you're comfortable, not because you're trying to reassign your work to me, but it's just that you feel like, oh, there's confidence. I'm confident with this work if it comes from the legal department. But I think sometimes don't enable it too much. Feel free to say no. Especially also, there are people who abuse it as well. And feel free to be firm and, be assertive and say no, because at the end of the day, it's this one brain that we have. And it can be quite overwhelming. There's a lot of, our job is not a pick this bottle up, put it, change the position. It's not a do it job like ops, that kind of, it's a think about it, reason. And it takes a lot. It does.
And do you find that being closer to each of the divisions within business, do you find that there's any particular division that you think, I don't want to say takes precedence, but sort of gives you more insight? Like, is it being closer to the directors, or being closer to finance, or being closer even to the business development team, that you would say, if you had a limit on your time, which of those divisions would you choose to spend a little bit more time with, so that it gave you almost a inroads, like greater inroads into how you think the business and what you think they need? Because you can't, of course, split, like you were saying, split yourself into 100 different directions. I've always found that fascinating, because you've got to. pick each of those divisions. They all have different specialities, and you're in danger of going, oh wait, I need to understand exactly what finance does, or I need to understand exactly what the sales team does. And to be honest, there's just not enough bandwidth. So
I don't know if there's a template for it. I guess each business has how they are structured. Who instructions come from, who is the direct interface of that instruction. So those are the things that will inform your decision. But I think be warm towards the people, not just the department. Let's not look at it abstractly, but just the people, where they are comfortable just coming in to talk about stuff. And the thing is, when people come, just like when they say, even in firms, somebody comes with their problems, they tell you all sorts of things, plus the one that requires to go to a therapist, but you then have to sort of pick what are the issues there. And I've learned that sometimes even when they send me an email on what they require, because they think they require that, sometimes they're not properly articulating what they need. So having informal conversations sometimes, and then I'm like, oh, this person would have missed this information if they had sent me some kind of formal email. That informal conversation helps me to sort of pick some legal issues as well, and I'm able to now, formalize my implementation or execution of the instruction. So I don't know if one needs to be close to a certain department, because there is a structure, right? Because you wouldn't want to go over, if somebody is head of department who reports to maybe the CEO, I don't need to go to the CEO. Besides, CEO is not the direct interface. And everybody comes to give the CEO feedback, right? But the guys on the ground, or ladies, or whoever's on the ground dealing with the instruction is whoever, even if it's a junior person, even if it's a senior person, as long as I think it's the process owner, the work owner that one needs to interface with. And it's on a case-by-case basis, because in-house counsels, we're a jack of all trades. So your instruction can come from finance. It could be a finance-related instruction, even if you're not a finance expert. It could be a property-related instruction, because maybe your company wants to secure a lease or something. So it could come from anywhere. Sales, it could be your core business instruction. So it's just wherever the instruction goes, try to build some kind of rapport with the teams, because there's also this instilled fear. Just people sometimes get scared to even open the department's office. Like, am I safe? So it's nice in a way, but sometimes we want more. Information is power, and when we have information, we're able to help. But we also need to make people feel comfortable coming to us. I think that's key.
And also, I do agree with what Bimpe just said, that you always need to you should be approachable as the GC. But for me, what has actually helped me to understand the business is to be close to the commercial team. Because I know that the commercial lady in my case she's my prime client. That's where most of my problems come from. That's where most of my work comes from. Because she's the one who negotiates the business, like all the business development and everything. She's the one who gets the contract drafts. So I always have to make sure that I give her time. Even when I'm busy, I always have to make sure that I give my commercial manager time, because she needs me all the time. She's the one who's busy sealing deals for the business. So I actually need to make sure that she is covered legal-wise, and also it has actually helped me to understand the business better. I can tell you that when I started like over 18 months ago, when I entered this company that I'm with, I had no idea of the industry. I also really didn't have much idea on the figures, because as we said earlier on, the ExCo, they're just interested in figures, in the graphs, how have we done, statistics and everything. But being close to this lady, the commercial manager, has actually helped me.
Both of you have touched on it, is that it's that curiosity, I think, that perhaps ensures we're approachable, but also ensures that we know what the people around us are doing, so that we're alive and aware of the issues. I think as the external lawyer, I think one of the criticisms you get as a lawyer is that we don't have enough commercial acumen when we give advice. We don't really contextualize. We contextualize it in the context of the law or the regulations or the facts that you've given us, but not in the context of the business or the sector or the commercial imperatives. And, it's one of the things where I think as a lawyer, I try really hard. As an external lawyer, I try really hard when I give an opinion to, like, on the first page go, this is what our thoughts are, and this is what we think you should do. And every single time, the in-house legal will come back and go, yeah, Nikita, that was all very nice, but can you shorten it? And I was like, I thought I did. And that just, for me, it just highlights how much more intense your exco is only interested in the numbers, only interested in what can happen and what they can do, etc. And as external lawyers, sometimes we're not, as much as we think we're trying, and we think we're very commercially practical. We're really not, and we're very reliant on you guys as sort of the people who brief us to alert us to that. And you've mentioned, Tanya, that you sometimes you go with external counsel to package a message that perhaps wouldn't otherwise be palatable internally. How do you navigate that with all the knowledge that you have of the company and the business and the financial sort of implications to your external lawyers to say, okay, you're giving us advice, but you need to contextualize it in this. How do you manage that? Because I can imagine that's actually quite difficult as well. There's just so much in your head that
I think if the in-house counsel can do the necessary groundwork, which is, I usually create a very comprehensive memo on things, especially if, I've sort of been carried along on the issues. It's always easy to sort of tell them how things started, depending on the issue. Just give them enough information, but how you package that information as well. So good record keeping helps you convey a better message to your external counsel. You have the necessary files or the correspondences are attached, and you're also labeling them properly. So all these things just make their life easy. So for me, I always go with the mindset of, I want you to be able to help me, but for you to be able to help me, I want you to have the right information in the right way that will make your life easy. And it really helps with their output, and then we can also have conversations. So if you're proposing that we go hard, it's my job to tell you, with this regulator, perhaps we don't go hard. Perhaps we tone down how we convey the message because this is how they operate. I can explain the nuances that are not legal, but more of how to just strategy, I guess. So I think it helps rather than just sending them, people just attach documents and then the external counsel then has to figure out how to sort of compartmentalize all that information. It just makes it very hard for them. So I think it's easier when you package everything properly, label everything properly, such that, like when you're applying for a visa and you have all the requirements, but when you package everything, the visa officer is happy. Like, you get a call saying your visa is ready in 3 days. There's a reason, because there's just a way you've followed the instruction and presented it in a manner that the visa officer, okay. So I think with external counsels, it will help them just package the information properly, and then they can help you better.
I like your analogy.
It's just what it is.
Have you ever had to just go no? Have you ever, despite all the protestations of business to the contrary, of saying, we really want to do this, you've just had to go, no, sorry, can't do it?
I mean,
others.
I mean, people say no, but in reality, to be honest, I don't even think we're that much of a no department. Especially when the decision to want to go with it comes from like the CEO or the high-level senior management team. You're not saying no. It's probably yes, but because who are you to even say no? So I actually think we're more constrained. Yeah. Because of internal, politics and the fact that you're a paid worker. It's just different from being external, where you have numerous clients and, the partner is probably protecting you because, I mean, in your mind, you're like, we've advised them, it's up to them. And, you sign all these nice agreements that sort of indemnifies you from all of that. But you're in-house, you're not going anywhere. The CEO says they want to do this. And then which are the gray areas?
Yeah.
Sometimes when to even say no when your job might be at risk just because of that. So you have to find that balance between, you can't lose your values as well, or your work ethic just because. So those are the unspoken aspects of being in-house where you truly believe, you stated the facts and all of that. And if the business chooses, so there's the tactic, this is the advice, but business, you have the liberty to try something else, but this is the advice. Sometimes you get to that point where a no is necessary. It is what it is.
And then, as you said, Tanya, you're managing risk, right?
Yes, you're just managing risk. And also, as what Bimpe says, is you just have to advise. There are certain instances where you can only do so much, as long as you have given them the advice. But if they still insist on carrying forward with whatever project that they want to carry forward with it, maybe just, I wouldn't say let them be, but just let them be anyway. Because as you said also, you are actually in their team. And most of the time, you're actually reporting to the executive director. He's your line manager. He's also responsible for your performance appraisal and everything. So you also don't want to come across as a hostile subordinate, But it always boils down to the way you actually put across your no. But if there is something that doesn't align also with your values, but overall with the law itself, and there's no exception, it's always important to make sure that you have informed them. And usually, in my case, they've never really gone above and beyond to just do as they please. They actually value my advice. But you also, as an in-house counsel, you need to give them time to actually get to a point where they can trust you. And they can only trust you because of what you're doing. Like, you need to earn their trust. Once you get there, you'll find that your no's won't be difficult to put across and they will be well received.
Absolutely.
But it's always important to always have it at the back of your mind that you are here to make sure that the business makes money, not that the business goes like backwards, because you also need to earn a living. There's a lot of communities that rely on that, and above all, the economy of the country relies on that business that you're actually a part of. So your job there is to ensure that you manage business.
I suppose a lot of what you do, though, is risk management.
Yes.
And saying, well, perhaps you could structure it this way or look at it differently to get to the result. Because ultimately, the aim of the business is to prosper and, try new things, etc. And I'm assuming a lot of what you do as well is probably not tried and tested, because they're not coming to you with a project that you've given advice on. I mean, there may well be, but a lot of the more interesting gray areas would be on projects that haven't been tried in the space before, right? And that's, you also want to be at the forefront of looking at and interpreting things differently. And is that, is that the exciting part of what you're doing when you're doing it? Or is that the part where you go, okay, maybe I do need some guidance on that now?
Personally, I find that exciting because it's much more challenging. And even in drafting, it's like sometimes most companies have their templates, but you can get restricted with templates because templates make you think a certain way. But then when something new, something peculiar is introduced, you have to think outside the template. You have to recreate the contract. You have to create something bespoke. And you do have to liaise with all the departments. Okay, so how do you intend to execute this again so that you can start thinking of the risk, what provisions to put there? And just picking up from what Tanya mentioned about, risks and minimizing them, something just came to mind was that even in risk management, when you're assessing risks, there are options, to minimize, to eradicate. So risks sometimes cannot be totally eradicated. And sometimes even if it's not what we expect or we want or the results, but it's now our job to sort of maybe minimize it or prevent as well. So yeah, so it can't always be a no, but sometimes a bit of okay, how can the impact be less or less adverse than what we expect it to be. But yeah, I mean, new things make the job much more interesting, I think. New requests.
And I suppose, Tanya, in your space, a lot of perhaps new regulations or changes in, the mining sector can I use the word notorious, for not necessarily being the most stable from a legislation point of view. There are quite a few changes in legislation, quite a few changes to how mining rights are held, etc., and percentages. And every couple of years, I see, it's not my space, but I see something blows up there. I mean, does that impact how you approach your role? Like, do you have to be proactive about potential changes that might come up in the sector?
Yeah, definitely. Like, as you said, the mining sector, it's, for me, it feels almost like a target of the government of some sort. Like, I can't put it in any other better way because it's one of the sectors in the country, or maybe even globally, that is always hit by policies. And you find that some of these changes in policy, they are not actually future friendly, and they are not looking at the business like, how is the business going to actually continue? They are not allowing for business continuity. So in my case, I've actually tried to be, as much as possible, to be proactive.
Right.
Every time. I'm always on the government gazette, and I always follow the websites of the Mining Council. Then I've also become very familiar with the mining magazines. There's a lot of them. I subscribe to those. I get updates and insights almost on a weekly basis. And the other thing that has actually helped me is to just also be in touch with other GCs that are in the same sector, but not necessarily in the organization that I am in.
Right.
But in an environment that is that is hugely regulated like mine, you actually need to be proactive. You should be interested in watching the news. You should always be a critical thinker and thinking things outside of the box, and just always be able to introduce certain things that actually help the business in that way. Yeah.
So there's almost like a roadmap where you're not. I mean, obviously we can't not. Sometimes government does what government does, but you're almost prepared for a change because you've now become this expert within the sector, with all, in terms of keeping track of it. Is it the same for you, Olabimpe, or no? So you become a sector expert in your business, basically, not more than a legal.
Very, very important. You have to monitor changes in laws. I don't know how we can do our jobs if we don't monitor the legal requirements applicable to our business activities, especially when our permits to do certain things are reliant on that. And it just requires that kind of level of alertness, I think. It's key. And not just even the core business, but in anything. And like I said, in-house work is, so even though I'm in the advertising sector, there are advertising laws to focus on, but then there are also other laws applicable to a certain process or operation within the company. It could even be HSE laws.
Right.
Especially if maybe you have some technical agreements, EPC contracts and the like, you still need to. But there's the core business you need to focus on. But there are also the other activities. I mean, the business can be involved in a joint venture in another market. You want to know the incorporation, the Companies Act of that market, which you need to study, and changes in that law as well that can determine your presence in that country. So that is not even in advertising. That is corporate. So it just depends on where the activity lies and staying alert every now and then. And yes, the news is key, and also knowing how economic factors, social factors are impacting the business, because that too can change one's approach and tone on how they handle some legal issues. So rather than say, oh, yeah, just cut that deal or terminate the contract. And then you're looking at other socioeconomic factors and you're thinking, perhaps don't, perhaps we suspend, perhaps, and then we come back, or, things like that. So they're key.
I must tell you that every time I deal with, and of course, outside of getting instructions from in-house counsel, every time I deal with all of you, outside of that, I am so impressed by all the balls that you have to juggle and how you keep this in the air without dropping anything, because our role as external counsel is just so much easier.
Yeah.
So I really do appreciate that. And, it's great to get this insight from the both of you. I hope our audience has, sort of benefited from this as well, because I think everyone struggles with it regardless of the sector that you're in. So thank you so much for your insight, and thank you for appearing with L&P on this roundtable discussion. And hopefully we can have you back. And thank you so much. Great.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
It was lovely.
Nice.
Yeah.
It was so